welcome to the Comics Coffee Metal Podcast, episode 30.
Hello and welcome to the Comics Coffee Metal Podcast. I'm your host, Don Cardenas, and welcome to 2021. Technically, as of recording, it is still 2020, but I'm holding out hopes that the year just didn't magically restart and we're right back in 2020 all over again. Fingers crossed, people. I'm a little bit optimistic here. So what can I say about 2020 that has not been said already by everybody? It was an extremely difficult year for everybody, very mentally tough, very financially tough for a lot of people. And I can say, as it comes to a close, I hold out a little bit of hope for 2021. Things are still going to be rough for a while, but I think things are moving in the right direction. I'm thankful that for the most part, everyone, I know and I care about have kept our health, kept our jobs, kept moving, kept moving forward. I managed to produce a lot more work than I expected during the pandemic, and it's a lot of work I'm very happy with. I've got a lot of new collaborations with people, and I've made some new friends along the way with that. And as much as I can appreciate that, I can also realize how lucky I am that that's my story for 2020, and a lot of other people have quite the opposite story. So let's hope that 2021 brings a lot more good news for everybody. On that topic, there's a bunch of things in 2021 I am really looking forward to sharing with everybody. I have a couple music projects that I'm really excited about. Really excited about finishing up Emissary and finally getting that out and having that done. I have some more anthology stuff coming up with some previous collaborators from this year or from 2020. And yeah, just a lot of fun stuff planned that I hope I can keep productive and I can just get that out, because if I do, I'm going to be very happy. I'm also just going to be working on just being more positive in general. Again, 2020 was a hell of a year for everybody, and I think I'm going to have to exercise some of this mental energy on keeping positive and trying to find the good in a lot of things to try to keep myself motivated, keep moving on, keep moving forward, because like I said, it's gonna be a rough road for a while, and things are gonna, even though vaccines are out there for the pandemic and all that, it's gonna be a while. It's gonna be a while before we're back to quote unquote normal, and it's gonna be easy to get disheartened again if we have any slip ups along the way and all that. So yeah, I'm gonna be using a lot more of my mental energy to try to stay positive and spread as much of that positivity as I can around. And on that topic, let's talk about some of my favorite things from 2020. In terms of metal, I listened to a bunch of metal this year, a lot more metal than I have in a very long time. And a lot of it was because of the show, a lot of it was just intentional to get back more into music and enjoying these things. And a band I've come across thanks to another podcast is called Orbit Culture, and their album Amnesia. And this is hands down my favorite record of 2020. It's melodic death groove metal, and the best way I can describe this band is they sound like the young offspring of Metallica and Gojira. And if you know me and if you listened to this podcast before, you know how much I love those two bands. So this is so far up my alley, you wouldn't believe. They are just chock full of potential. This album has a lot of what I love. Big riffs, epic and melodic passages mixed with a good helping of just brutal screams and some solid blast beats. The vocals by singer guitarist Nicholas Carlson are definitely inspired by a younger James Hetfield, but the screams, they are much more mature, and they evoke a lot of that same aggression and passion you get from bands more experienced, and that's a lot of the Gojira influence, just that kind of just guttural rawness that they extrude. The lead guitars by Richard Hansen, they lean more into layers and textures, and then as opposed to ripping out crazy solos, but it suits the songs perfectly. There's no overplaying. Everything services the song, and it works together really well. introspective lyrics and emphasis on rhythm by the solid and super tight team of Frederick Lennartson on bass and Christopher Wallerstedt on drums. It just further cements this as my favorite album of 2020. You get a lot from this album. There's the pummeling Day of the Cloud to the introspective and epic Set Us Free. The band is going for a real high bar, and while I don't think this will be in history, like I don't think this is going to be like their best album ever, they are certainly headed towards making that within the next 1 or 2 releases, and that's something I'm very much anticipating. So here's a sample of my favorite track, North Star of Nisha. Okay, so my favorite comic of 2020 is, hands down, the series Mountainhead from IDW. I mentioned the first issue of this series a few months back. I've had the artist Ryan Lee on the show, and now that it's finally concluded, I was just solidified in my belief that this is one hands down like the best series to come out in 2020 for me. The whole thing is written by John Lees, art by Ryan Lee, colors by Doug Garbark, letters and design by Sean Lee, and edited by Bobby Curnow. The series follows a young teen named Abraham, who's eking out a life with his eccentric and probably not altogether there father, robbing homes and living off the grid. After they're busted by the cops, after one particular break-in, it's revealed that Abraham is actually a young boy who was kidnapped from his original family about 10 years ago. After being returned to a family he doesn't remember, in the sleepy mountain town of Bryrock, strange things start happening, and it's clear something is definitely amiss in this place. The series takes some turns into Lovecraftian and John Carpenter-esque suspense and monster action. The script by John Lees is super tight, and the pacing makes this 5-issue series feel like something bigger and much more epic, which I'm saying as a compliment. Like, it's a lot packed in there, but it doesn't feel stuffed or rushed. A lot is thrown at us, and a few big concepts are on display here, but it's never confusing, and the characterizations are unique and honest. Of course, for me, the art was the biggest draw of the series, because not only is Ryan Lee a friend, I am also a huge fan of his work. He has an excellent handle on exaggerated cartoonish figures and shapes, but he also adds in these grungy and detailed textures that they not only manage to ground the designs, but they really just add to the overall unsettling nature of the series. Also, as you would expect from a man who has put out a couple of art books titled Monstrosity, the monsters and creatures here are awesome, gross, and would delight every fan of the thing. Ryan also really pushed his layouts a lot in this book, and it shows. There's multiple pages and sequences where things are well beyond a simple grid, and Ryan handles them perfectly. Nothing is ever confusing, nothing is ever lost in the translation. It's all very visually appealing and just coherent, but also interesting. Doug Garbark's colors are no doubt a vital part to this book as well. Doug really knows how to work with Ryan's lines in a way that is completely natural yet vivid. He knows when to go dark, he knows when to pull back. I hope these two stick together as a team for whatever the future holds for them. The lettering and design by Sean Lee rounds out the book, and while this kind of stuff tends to get overlooked in the grand scheme of things, Sean provides a vital piece to the experience of Mountainhead. His wispy speech balloons were a great touch that it added just a little bit of extra surreal to the whole series, and Sean always does an excellent job, and this is no exception. Okay, so now that I've put out some positivity, I've gone over my favorite stuff from the past year, let's get to one of my favorite conversations I've had this past year. Mario Candelaria is an upcoming writer who has a ton of great credits to his name. And we had a really great chat about metal, social media, wrestling, making comics, scripting for art. It's just a ton of stuff. So much stuff. With Mario's help, I think this podcast is starting out the year strong. So let's hit 2021 rolling with Mario Candelaria. So, Mario, as I've been doing this podcast over the course of the year, it really started off with me talking to people I really know. And, you know, I think over the course of the past couple months or so on Twitter, I've gotten to, see you tweeting, and we've been Twitter friends, whatever you want to call that. So, I'm getting to a point to where it's like, I want to start talking to new people and, just kind of stretching out from there. So I think that I have like a lot of question marks with you because as much as, it feels like you're prevalent on Twitter and being around, I feel like, well, I couldn't tell you what Mario is into. So I have to say right off the bat, comics, coffee, metal, what are you into right now?
Yeah, I mean, geez, you've probably hit it on the head. I don't think anyone really fully grasps what I am, including myself. But, geez, comics, I dig a lot of stuff. I love a lot of Marvel and DC. I mean, I dance with, sorry, I dance with who brought me to the party, right? And that's always, the big superheroes. But,
Yeah.
the big event books, of course. What's that? Death Metal from
Mm-hmm.
DC. I
Yeah.
haven't gotten all of it so far, but I like where it's going. But a lot of what I'm really interested, oddly enough, is the Power Rangers relaunch that Boom
Okay.
just came out with. Two different titles, Mighty Morphin, and then the other one is Power Rangers. They introduced a new Green Ranger. I'm gonna be honest, I've not been a Power Rangers fan since I was 8 or 9 with the first season. So when I saw that the comics was pretty much taking up around that time, I thought, hey, this is perfect for me to try to dive into. I don't know what the SPD is. I don't know what the Dino Hunters versions are, all the other Power Rangers. But yeah, I'm digging what Boom Elise is doing with the Mighty Morphin stuff.
Yeah, a lot of people are really digging that. I think the artist Dan Mora just released this like ridiculously like packed super gatefold cover image with like I have to assume at least like 200 different Power Ranger iterations on there. People are
Yeah,
stoked. People are stoked about Power Rangers. That was maybe I want to say I was maybe I want to say 12, 11, 12, 13 when that dropped. So I was just past like the sweet spot for it. Because I remember when it premiered, I was like, oh, cool. And then I was like, I don't know. I'm almost a teenager, It seems like kind of kiddie stuff, So, I kind of missed the whole Power Rangers thing. But, you know, being online and a lot of creators, younger creators, like they are absolutely stoked about these books. So,
yeah, it's a big topic with my friends, but a lot of them have been lifelong fans. Like I said, after the first season, I dropped off. I think what happened was I moved away with my family from Brooklyn to upstate, and we didn't have cable. And it's
mm.
one area if you didn't like, there's no antenna TV like there was in New York, so you weren't going to get anything. And I just fell off the fandom. I got into more pro wrestling and such because of my friends. But yeah, I'm glad to be back in the morphin grid, as they say in the biz.
No, that's awesome. There's a lot of great creators working on those books too, so
Hmm.
it's no surprise that people are pumped about that.
Yeah, I mean, Dan Mora, like you mentioned, did that amazing triple, quadruple gatefold, and now he's I want to say, the lead artist on Batman, or I
Detective
don't.
Comics, yeah, Detective
Yeah,
Comics, which is you know, I know some people who are huge fans of his, and so I would see a lot of his stuff in my feed, and he's one of those guys where you're like, oh yeah, he's gonna hit it big. You just got to get him on the right project, and boom, now he's doing Batman.
of course. Yeah, I'm also digging I Walk with Monsters from Vault. I know Paul Cornell wrote it, but my friend Sally I'm gonna butcher her last name, but Cantorino. She's the illustrator on it, and she's the reason why I'm purchasing it. I've loved Sally's work for a couple of years now, and I'm happy to see that she's, getting out there and getting her moment in the sun.
Awesome. Awesome. So, talk comics, coffee. What kind of coffee like gets you going? Like what's your poison there?
Yeah, I don't drink coffee. I'm not a coffee person. I'm not
All
really
right.
a hot liquid
Podcast
person.
over. All right. You're out of here. No.
All right, thank you very
No, no,
much.
it's perfect. It's perfectly cool. Well, so what's the thing for you? What's the drink for you that like, or it doesn't have to be a drink. Is there like a specific food or whatever that's just like, this is my thing I have to have every day?
No, in the mornings, I love, this is going to sound weird. I like ice cold stuff. And
Okay.
I always try to do, if my wife goes to Starbucks, I always try to get orange juice over ice.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. It's I don't know why I never really drank coffee. But it's more of what, like the cold, when it hits your stomach and hits your teeth. That sort of gives me the jolt that I need.
Okay. Yeah, I get it. I didn't drink coffee until my mid 20s.
Hmm.
Like before then, I was straight up tea. Or I'd be the guy like opening up like a diet Pepsi at 8 o'clock in the morning. Um,
Oh yeah,
so
I'm there
yeah.
too. I don't try to get that early, but I'm addicted to my Diet Mountain Dews.
Okay.
I try to have one for lunch and one for dinner. So that way,
Hmm.
I try to regulate it. Especially now that there's a can shortage, apparently, with Diet Mountain Dews.
Yeah,
It's hard. It's hard
yeah.
to find.
I noticed that because once the pandemic hit and all that, I fell back on drinking soda pretty hard, and I like the cherry sodas.
Okay.
So like Diet Cherry Pepsi or Cherry Zero, Coke Zero, whatever. And I noticed like they were like not in stores for the longest time. It was just like the regular flavors. I'm like, is there like some weird cherry flavoring shortage or something? And then just one day by happenstance, I came across a thing that said there's a can shortage, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, well, I guess they're prioritizing the standards, but I'm like, well, that sucks.
Well, I
So
mean, have you gotten to the point where you walk down the aisle and if you happen to see the cases, you'll just grab every one available?
no, thankfully, it's not at that point.
I cannot confirm that I've done that then.
Well, it doesn't help that the grocery stores around me, like the only way it's even like financially feasible to like not spend a ridiculous amount per case, you have to buy like three of them at a time or four
Of
of them at a
course.
time. So it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I gotta buy in $12 worth of soda, otherwise I'm gonna spend almost half of that on one thing. So yeah, it's it's
That's
a
the
racket,
hustle.
man.
That's the
That's the hustle. That's
justification.
the hustle, and I'm a sucker for it. So
I mean, I told my wife, she's like, "Why do you go to Wawa and get a $2 20 ounce when you can, get I don't know something like what 36, 48 cans for just ten
yeah,
bucks?"
there you go. All right, so we've pegged that. You like the ice cold drink in the morning, and I
Hmm.
can totally dig on that. Especially when it's in the summertime and all that. That's no one's raring up for a hot coffee, um, unless a psychos that the rare mornings that you do. So now metal, like I'm pretty sure I know you like metal.
Yeah.
I just don't know exactly what. And given the wide berth of metal subgenres and all that, like I can't even fathom the guess like where to start.
When I was deep in the scene, I was coming up with bands like Every Time I Die, Unearth,
Okay.
Bury Your Dead and stuff like that. But I'm in my 30s now. I'm trying to get into more of the classic rock stuff. I mean, I know
Okay.
that's not per se as cool metal, but I've been really vibing Blue Oyster Cult lately.
Okay. They're proto metal. They're in the DNA of so many of these earlier metal
Hmm.
bands that you can't you can't like write them off as not essential or not something you should be going to check out for
Yeah, I mean,
sure.
they have a ton of hits. Like when I was growing up, I never really listened to older music. I was into hip hop, so I was listening to Hot 97 for a long time in high school, and then when I got into high school, I was listening to more. I'm not gonna be ashamed to say it, but your Limp Bizkit, your Korn, your Marilyn Manson, and such. And then after that, I was into the punk scene, so I was listening to what my friends were putting out in newer music. But when I got older and Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple Music came out, I started diving into, the catalogs of, where bands got their influences from, and I started really digging the vibes of 60s and 70s bands. But Blue Oyster Cult is really, I was surprised how many of their songs I knew but didn't know were them. Like
Yeah,
Godzilla.
yeah, they are definitely one of those bands where it's like, oh, that's Blue Oyster Cult, or for sure. And who doesn't know the Godzilla song?
Hmm. I mean, Don't Fear
Uh,
the Reaper. That's, I think, their bread and butter.
yeah,
But
definitely.
Burning for You, I was like, oh wow, that's completely different sounds for all these songs.
Yeah, and the cool thing about Blue Oyster Cult is that I call them proto metal, and that's kind of how they've been labeled because so many metal bands have listed them as an influence.
Hmm.
And it's if you if you're a musician and you're like, all right, I'm gonna cover an older song and make it heavy or whatever, you can literally take like any Blue Oyster Cult song, and it is so easy just to make it like a super heavy metal song. So that's where I think a lot of the influences come bear because it's the structure and the tonality of what they're doing. Even Burning for You, like I don't know, but I know there's like some like a dozen sick ass metal covers of that song on YouTube or something somewhere.
Of course.
So no, yeah, and Don't Fear the Reaper, and how even my all time favorite band Metallica, they covered Astronomy, and that's like a trippy song, but they made it into a heavy Metallica song. So, and it was like effortless. It
I'll have to
seemed
check that one
so.
out.
Yeah, they Metallica did the Garage Inc. double disc where there's all their covers. They did old covers, new covers. I think that came out like what 98 or something like that. But yeah, it's on it. It's really good. So you mentioned growing up you were you had a brief dalliance with Power Rangers, and you grew up reading Marvel DC stuff and
Hmm.
getting into wrestling and all that. Was writing comics always something that you were kind of aspiring to, or was it just kind of something you just kind of fell into?
No, this is not something that I always wanted to do. I have a saying I like to throw out there that just because you like the circus doesn't mean you want to run and join the clowns, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I very much felt that way. I don't want to say I grew up rudderless, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life for a long time. I was into a lot of graphic design and such, and I thought I was going to end up more in that field. Then I started
Okay.
writing screenplays and such, and I thought that could be, an avenue before I settled into, your basic corporate job in my early 20s. And I found a lot of success there, climbing the ladder. And as I got older, I think I was 25 or so, I started just kicking around ideas in my head. Stories, but of course, starting on comics, you never know,
Yeah.
how to really get started. So you Google search or look at forums and DeviantArt and such back then. But yeah, it wasn't until I was probably, I want to say 30. I'm 36 now, but it was like 30 where I realized that I could, make a pretty good go with this stuff. I was also doing comedy for a bit in New York at the same time, but once I stopped traveling there for gigs, I started focusing more on comics.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it is one of those things where it's like just because you love something doesn't mean you want to go do it.
Hmm.
But I have the opposite mentality of that though, because I love so many things. I'm like, I should try that. I
That's
ended up
healthy
being
though.
so, but no, that's cool. And you're only a couple years younger than me, so you know you kind of decided to make your go out of it. This kind of around the same time frame I did as well, where it's like, yeah, I think I could try to do this. Let me try to do this. And you brought up the graphic design thing, and I just
Yeah.
remembered that you were posting out logo ideas and stuff you've done, and some of them are really cool. So it's I think that's a neat little uh, thing to have in your back pocket there, because uh, when you're a writer and comics and all that, it's every skill set you have is to your advantage. And if you can, make your own logos and have that kind of like artistic and direct input into it, it's such a huge thing because, the package of it is so important. Unfortunately, but you need to have the nice, pretty package to it.
Of course.
And you mentioned comedy. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, say the thing with making my logos is one of my first, I think my actual first widely published book. I'm not going to say names. I don't want to get in internet trouble. But we had a logo that I paid quite a substantial amount for, and the artist looked at it and was like, "Why did you pay X amount? That's something I could have made." For nothing. And ever since then, I was like, oh, yeah, you know what? This guy's right. I have the basic skills to know how to make clipping masks and use lasso tools and such. I can probably do that. So I've been practicing ever since. And so just the last year, I think, with quarantine and a bunch of pitches that I've been creating, or even just short stories for anthologies, I was like, you know what? Let me try to make a masthead with text. I mean, I can't draw a breath, let alone a figure. So I'm not going to try to, draw the comic, but I can try at least make a pretty cool looking graphic. Some of them are good. Some of them are, duds, and I try again. But, it's all just repetition.
Yeah, it's part of the process.
Mhm.
But no, it's cool that you have it because you also have the creative investment in the logo. Like what the story is about. What things represent, and the tone and all these things. That intimately.
Mhm.
So you have these additional flares you can put on things, or these little nods to things, or whatever, how intricate you want to be or how subtle you want to be with the logo, and whether you want to include some sort of story element in it or things like that. So no, I think that's really cool whenever there's a writer who's like involved, like Chris Sebela. He he's a graphic designer, and he does a lot of the like recap pages and layout,
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. That stuff I think is really cool because it just adds, like, not that writers don't give enough to the comics. It I think it makes it a more cohesive package, to be honest. Like, people are, everyone's involved with the look of the final product, much less the story and all that. So no, I think that's really cool. You mentioned you were doing comedy for a while.
Yeah, I was a performing stand comedian in New York City while I lived in the greater Philadelphia region. So that was a
Oh.
nice, fun 2 hour trip. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm from there and I have friends that live there, so it's easy for me to find a couch to crash on if I needed a
Hmm.
place to, stay. One time I didn't crash, and it was annoying. I left here at work at 3 o'clock and I did a show, and I did okay. But one of my best friends, Paul, went with me, and my goal was, okay, I will take the subway back with him to his place and just drive home, and I'll be home by 2 a.m., right?
Yeah.
So he went out to the bar, and this is years and years ago. So this is before he was married, but we're at the bar, and he met a girl, and they just started talking, and they kept talking, and they kept talking. I'm dead sober because I'm thinking I'm gonna have to leave and drive any minute now. So I'm sitting there watching Sports Center, and um, it's bad when you start seeing the same segments on Sports Center repeated.
Yeah.
So I'm pissed. And that's like right around the same time I stopped doing comedy, probably because of him. But it's one of those things. I was just like, all right, I am gonna. I was determined to go home, and by goddamn it, I'm gonna go home. So, um, my wife just happened to be up and noticed I wasn't in bed, but she saw me pulling in at the same time, and so yeah, that was probably the last time I did comedy. I think
Huh.
because of that bad experience.
Well, I think, just the fact that you were going up and doing stand up, that's like utterly horrifying to go up there and like, I'm going to try to make people laugh. And I know it's not that simple or necessarily that mindset. Like, I'm going to make
Mhm.
people laugh. It's just, you're going to do your thing. But it's just the overall, like, this can go so bad so fast, and then I'm still gonna be stuck up here for a few minutes.
Yeah,
So,
I've
uh,
had those moments. I've had it go horrible and I've had it go great. I mean, it really is. Alcohol helps, to be honest, but that's not the best because then you'll forget and get drunk and forget what you're going to say, or you're not sharp for
mhm.
hecklers. But yeah, you get to get over your fear of talking in public really quick when you start doing that.
And that certainly, I'm sure, comes in handy if you're doing a con as well. Now, trying to promote your books and just trying to engage with people.
Yeah,
Um,
my con techniques are weird, but it is based off of this. I'm a big wrestling fan, so I like to call people out if I see them wearing a wrestling costume or a t-shirt, and then we
mhm.
start, of course, engaging in conversation from there. Some of them convert over to sales, some of them don't, but it's just fun to people see and make that connection.
Yeah, I think that's huge, and it's not. I've done similar things with be it with like a band T-shirt
Hmm.
or if I see like someone's carrying a print or something that one of my friend from one of my friends' table, or something like that. It's cool making those connections. It's nice if it comes into a sale, but you're also stuck there behind the desk, behind the table for hours and hours. So sometimes it's nice just to have a nice little 1 minute conversation with somebody about
Of
something
course.
that you're both digging. Um, so you mentioned that you kind of started going at a run around 6 years ago, making writing comics, and I would say looking at all the stuff you've done, I'd say you've been pretty aggressive towards getting shit done, which I applaud.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah, it's a little maddening sometimes. I think right now I'm at a an upswing, but as you know, when you're a creator and you're at that low point and you feel like nothing's hitting, there's no good feeling about that.
yeah,
But like you said, I've been aggressive at it, so it's
yeah.
just
No, and you've
shooting
been
a shotgun.
you've been a part of a lot of great anthologies. The
Thank you.
27 anthology, Killer Queen, which I have a copy of sitting that I have yet to read.
Oh no.
You were in that Grey Haven. You Are Not Alone, which I was in too. I saw that on your list. I was like, oh, I was in that too. Cool. Uh,
Awesome.
but then you've jumped up and you're like in the Maybe Sunday anthology that Eric Pilicki and Matt Miner put together, and then you also had like your own Mario anthology, the Tales from the Pandemic, which I know
Yeah.
I thought was cool, and I think more writers should do that. And as an artist, I wanted to do that for myself, where it's like
Hmm.
I get six different writers and I do six different styles, six different types of stories.
I
That's
mean,
more
go for it.
ambitious. That's pretty ambitious for myself, to be honest. But but seeing writers do it, I'm like, yeah, like this stuff is really cool because you get to see these different, just the versatility of somebody, even if
Mhm.
it's within the context of the Tales from the Pandemic. It was all different stories, all these different artists with these vastly different styles, and a
Mhm.
lot of great art happening too. You got guys like Joe Hunter and Adam Ferris and Andy Michael, and I'm gonna mess up his name. J. Paul Shike, is it,
I believe
or
so. I never heard
Chic?
it out loud, actually.
Okay, but just different styles and but all great stuff. So was Tales from the Pandemic kind of something that instantly came to you, or were you kind of thinking along those lines and then the pandemic hit and you're like, well, this is the perfect vehicle, I guess, to do this with since this happened, or were you kind of already, or was the idea of a Mario only anthology just not even a thought on your mind until this?
See, that's a very good question. And it's not a simple answer. I'm gonna have to go back a little bit. I put out online on Twitter saying that I approached comics the way that I guess rappers approach music. And when you're up and coming in, music, you want to get on compilation albums, you want to get feature
Mm-hmm.
spots, anything that can help, push you to show labels, whoever, that you can be what they're looking for, right? You got
Yeah.
to build an audience. And that's how I always felt with anthologies, was that, this is a great, one track for me to have. This is a great feature on someone's book. I might not be the headline on there, but hopefully if, someone picks it up, they say, hey, who's this person also? So I wanted to do something that was kind of like a demo tape then, just a bunch of short stories put together. If a full graphic novel or album, or excuse me, or if a full graphic novel or if a mini series is like an album, an LP, then something like Tales from the Pandemic would be my EP.
Hmm.
Something that we just put out there on SoundCloud or in my case, Gumroad, and just push it out. You're going to take a hit financially, but you get more eyes on the product and you try to build name for not just yourself but everyone else involved. Um, that's something I was toying with for a while, but I wasn't too sure what to like what the story would be or the connecting element. And then when, of course, when COVID hit and a lot of my comics friends were losing work because, production was shutting down, I I wanted to help whoever I could. So I was like, hey, I have an idea. Why don't you guys give me 3 pages, and I'll pay you a fair rate for all of them. And then just put a collection out of just, these 3-page stories.
That's awesome. That's a great way to think about, you know, getting into comics or working your way into comics, because that's it's such a not necessarily tried and true or like definite way to get more exposure or to get, more recognition for doing comics, but it is a pretty solid way to do that. And it's a great way to build up a network of peers
Hmm.
and people who can, help lift each other up and things like that. Like I had tried to make a go of something like that when I was first going, but I don't think I was mentally in the headspace to keep doing that. And then, when once the pandemic hit, I'm like, well, I can't, if I'm not going to do a story for myself, I do need
Hmm.
some sort of page rate. So I thought, like, what's a decent, like, small page rate, whatever. So I put that out there. The short stories, like, hey, let's do something. And I've done 3 or 4 since, which is nice because after I finished my last big project, I was just kind of, you know, in pitch hell, essentially, like doing pitches and stuff that you can't show, but and they end up going nowhere, and it's like, ugh. So like I have this art I can't show anybody, and it looks like I just disappeared from making sequential art for like 6 months.
And that's the thing that sucks. Like you said that you can't show anybody anything. A lot of what I've noticed the past few years in social media is I said recently that I feel like comic social media is like an arms race, and
Hmm.
everyone out there is trying to put something on there. Otherwise, they will feel that they are out of sight and out of mind.
Yeah,
Like if you're not showing that you're creating, then no one will know that you are creating, and maybe they'll just lose interest or drop off.
yeah, and that's definitely you know a concern.
Hmm.
But in my experience, I've had, you know, especially this year, there's times where I was just gone or not posting anything, and nothing happened. Like I didn't like lose audience. I didn't once I started posting again, like I was getting the same average number of interactions and likes on drawings and stuff that I was before. So it's like, okay, so it's not necessarily an out of sight, out of mind thing, and it's really a lot of it is in your head. Now, it's hard to get that out of your head, of course.
Of course.
And for writers, I can't even like for artists, it's like, oh, I can do a quick sketch or something, and even if it's crappy, it's like, oh, look, I'm drawing. Look, I'm doing something. And for writers, it's like you have a little bit more of an uphill battle with doing that. Um,
Yeah, I'll take a picture of my laptop while I'm watching TV. I did that the other day, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm writing," and it's just the background image on my laptop
yeah.
and
Yeah.
the football game that was on. Or I'll take a picture of my keyboard, or I'll blur out something on the screen, or maybe one of those
Hmm.
mastheads I created, just to show like, "Hey, I'm creating something." I don't want to do the standard, and I hate this. Oh my God, I can't believe what I received in my inbox type thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like that's like such a cliche thing to put out because
Like
you're
you
not really
want you
showing anything.
you want to have that moment where you could say something like that, but then you don't want to. like participate in the announcement of something like that. I totally understand. I totally understand and get that, and would, to be honest, probably be hard for me not to do something like that if I ever had like an amazing like news thing in my inbox. But I know it would be like I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm still doing it anyway. The situation.
I think that gets easier. Like the excitement when you're getting up, the ranks, I guess, in comics. It's weird to say that. Like every step is exciting as hell, right? But once you've been there for a while, then it's just a little like it's not like it doesn't hit as hard, right? But then the next
Hmm.
step would. So you gotta think like someone like Mark Waid or Bendis, they're probably just like, yeah, awesome, and then they'll just keep on working, and then they'll have these big announcements drop that no one predicted or knew of,
and
unless someone stooged them out, right?
Yeah, and they'll literally be like, and probably with complete honesty, like, "Oh, I forgot that was being announced today." Like, meanwhile,
Oh,
the guy a couple down, a couple rungs down the ladder has that date circled and highlighted on his calendar, and he's like,
hmm
"At 9 a.m., I'm going to post a teaser, and then 10 a.m., I'm going to post another little teaser." And
there's like big news coming today. Tune in.
yeah. But a lot of I think a lot of it is in good fun though, like just
hmm
kind of like hyping up hyping each, or like calling out, like almost like it's like, hey, I got this good news, like kind of like trying to rally your crew together
Yeah, that's
to
what it is.
to
Also,
help lift you up and all that, and I think that I can appreciate it on that level, of course, for sure.
I
But no,
mean,
I
just because
also
like
I
it's not sorry, just because it's not for me doesn't mean that I don't,
yeah
like it, or I don't appreciate my other friends do it. I try to signal boost my friends as often as possible, and honestly, I don't see every post everyone makes. So if I see something say, hey, something will be announced later, I'll try to make a mental note to check back in on their feed just in case I missed it.
yeah, and I'm not saying either way is good or either line of thinking is better than the other. It's just it's all it's all in good faith, I think, for the most
hmm
part, and but no, I can totally see the point of view and understand, and probably aspire to want to have the point of view of, yeah, I'm not gonna like boost this, just a random like news thing I can't talk about. But I guess especially with comics, it seems like there's always some sort of bad news around the corner, or you know it's there's a tendency for wanting to just like boost positive things and have some sort of positivity being pumped out there. But yeah.
Of course. I mean, before the world ended, I had three comics picked up at the same time, and I was, of course, on cloud nine. And as of right now, what's today? The 9th of December. I have only one of those still, in production because issues with the publisher, or they closed down, or I didn't like the direction they were headed in. To, like various things.
Hmm.
Just changes the course. So I mean, like you said, bad news is always around the corner.
Yeah, so it's understandable when people want to hold on to the good stuff as long as they possibly can. So on top of writing comics and all that, you shared with me that you wrote a short film that I watched, and I'm watching it. I'm waiting for the drop. Like, what's the hook here? What's the twist at the end, whatever. And I did not see it. So when it happened, I was just like guffawing a bit, like, oh geez. And that's so the chart is the name of your short film, and it's won a bunch of film awards and stuff like that. And was writing short films and films, is that something that kind of branched off from writing comics, or is that something that kind of was in the back of your mind when you're doing comedy, stand up, and all that?
The chart, I can't say my stuff. The chart was actually born in the cellar, in the comedy cellar with my
Hmm.
friends. The lead of the of the movie, Tara Canistrasi, and the director Kim Hellam. We all came up with the same group of comedians in New York, and they were putting together a pilot for a sketch show, and that was one of the surviving sketches that made it, all the way from the initial meetings all the way to the end. Funding for the whole sketch pilot didn't go through, but they filmed a couple of these shorts, and that's the one that everybody felt was the strongest to, submit to film festivals and network with. And yeah, that I don't know where that idea came from. Maybe that came from watching, too much Saturday Night Live and Key and Peele, but I love Tara and Kim, and just I love being in an environment where you can just sit around and just throw ideas at each other. And that just sort of popped up in my head of I don't want to give the twist away, but
No, you don't have
just
to.
just the swerve, I always love movies, M Night. He's another Philly guy, he always does his twists, but I think Key and Peele did it best consistently with a lot of their sketches, and that just
Definitely.
it's a simple like 1 or 2 minute concept that just turned on a dime.
No, no, it's awesome, and
Thank
it's
you.
additionally cool to see comic writers branching out into other things now. So given the backstory for how this short got made, I'm assuming there's not, or am I incorrect to assume that there's not any like real immediate plans to do any more shorts or anything like that, or it's just kind of let's see what happens.
Uh, yes and no. That's another one of those not simple answers. As soon as this thing started getting out to festivals and started winning awards, abroad as well as domestically, we started thinking of other ideas. Of course, we looked at, the notes from our meetings, back when we first started, as well as trying to refine other ones. A big part of the delays before COVID were just the budget.
Hmm.
I wrote what I felt was this beautiful script, and Tara saw it, and she was like, "Mario, I love your script, but you have like 6, 7 locations and all these great shots, and I cannot afford this." So yeah, we're just we're trying to find more simple stuff, but now that COVID hit, of course, they're in New York City and I'm down here. It's just trying to be able to get together safely and put a crew together, in a way that doesn't look, amateurish. I think last time they used some type of Canon camera, but they had to rent it from someone. I don't know. It's a whole thing, but I think the big part right now is just COVID and trying to get past this.
Yeah, I can't imagine like what's this done for the independent film community, and just even if it's a small crew, it's like, what do you do? You're all locked. You can't. Yeah, it just seems to like put a lot of probably really cool ideas to Santos. And like you said, you've had 3 comic projects, and once COVID hit and all that,
Hmm.
be it if COVID was the main culprit to things getting shut down, or going astray, or if it was just something that was going to happen anyway based on creative differences or what have you. It's been rough for all creative industries, but you do have a surviving comic, and it's with the publisher that my listeners should be pretty familiar with, because I've had both Bob France and Kevin Cuff on the show, and that is Scout Comics, and they're doing a lot of really cool stuff. And you have this really awesome comic. You sent me a little preview of it, and to purposely use a pun, and it's bad, and I'm sorry, but it's a killer book. it looks it looks great. I hope I'm saying it right. It's Serge Acuna, right?
Yes,
Uh,
Acuna,
Acuna. I'm
Acuna,
sorry.
like Hakuna Matata,
Oh,
kind of.
yeah, I didn't know if there's an Enya over the end, but
Yes,
Serge Acuna, um, Kath Lobo, Matt Krotzer, and your editor James Ferguson. And yeah, you sent me the preview, and like I love the concept. I think it's a really cool idea. I noticed,
thank you.
it's like you have a lot of horror stuff, And I know you probably wouldn't define yourself as a horror writer, but is that something you kind of feel more gravitated towards, or is it just kind of that's where the opportunities to write stories have come? Because, like you mentioned, doing anthologies and stuff like that is something you're shooting to do, and horror anthologies, are more prevalent than any other type of anthology. So, is that just kind of just the happenstance of that, or do you feel just more of a pool to do more kind of horror related stuff?
When I was doing comedy, one of the things they always said that was horror and comedy are like really close cousins. There's always setups and the punchlines are the payoffs. And yeah, you're right. I never really set out to be a horror writer. To be honest, I don't know what type of writer I am. I guess I'm more indie darling mumblecore than anything, But yeah, this our book KILLCHELLA. The origin of the story came from a news article that I found funny, and it was about this lady from New York who paid, I want to say, around $100,000 to get herself Coachella ready. So it was money in not just wardrobe, but plastic surgery and weight loss and all that stuff. Because her goal wasn't just to look good in her photos; she wanted to look good in the background of strangers' photos. And I turned to my wife and I
Yeah.
said, "What type of people do this?" And I was like, "Man, can you imagine if something bad just happens?" And then that's, of course, where the origin of our comic came from.
That's awesome. So, did you want to go a little bit more into what Killchella is about, or the kind of the elevator pitch?
Yeah, so the story is about a group of friends in Los Angeles who they've grown apart, as most adult friends do, and they decided to get together for a fun weekend in the desert at a big music festival we cannot legally name. So, and of course, at this festival, they get invited to a very exclusive VIP concert from a reclusive pop star who's making her return after 5 years, named Topanga Cornell. But what they don't know is that Topanga's crazy, and she is using this return concert as a mass human sacrifice ritual. And she has enlisted her most obsessive fans to help her pull this off.
That just hearing that is just like that's I haven't heard a concept like that,
Oh, thank
and
you.
I think it's really cool. It's you're you're doing the great things that that horror can do and comics can do. You're taking these kind of because you can kind of imagine best friends getting together and having this experience at this massive festival, and then this this reclusive person is actually cult or whatever insane person. It's like, okay, let's smash those two things together and have something really cool, something that no one's done yet, which I think is really awesome. And again, the art looks amazing. Serge is someone who I've seen pop up a lot. I think going back to wrestling, I think he's done some wrestling comics and stuff like that. So
Yeah, he was the lead on Boom's WWE series. That's how I met him.
yeah, okay.
Big wrestling fan. I've said multiple times. I met him. Doing that. I actually tried to buy original art off of him, because I'm a collector of buying pages. But he told me he only does things in digital, and that broke my heart.
I know a good handful of people who love buying original
Hmm.
art and or pages, and whenever they're like, "Oh, I just found out so and so is all digital," it's like I guess I feel for you, man. Like, but yeah, I've noticed a lot of digital artists now. They're kind of doing that artist proof thing.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I think that's cool. When I first heard about it, I was like, all right, I guess. But if it's done a certain way, I think that could be pretty neat. And
Yeah.
especially for someone who's, it may not equate owning, hand drawn pages, but
Mhm.
it's you're having something cool and unique and limited and things like that. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
he's
Sorry, like a lot of people, they it's like me having my rough notes and then an outline, and then I write the script, right? So they'll,
Yeah.
do loose the panels, the thumbs, and then they'll print it out, and then from there they'll do type pencils and inks.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So it's cool. But yeah, Serge has a real great grasp on dynamicism and just, and it's really apparent. Like, I didn't realize he was the artist while I was reading it, and I'm like, who's this? I'm like, oh, okay, this makes perfect sense then.
Yeah,
So,
he has a great eye for fashion, and of course, having the setting for this story, a lot of the people who go there are big into fashion, and
yeah.
I wanted someone who could capture different body types, but also, who has a good finger on the pulse of, what the current clothing trends are for
Hmm.
different people, for influencers and such.
Yeah, I can say, myself included, that's always like the most difficult thing when you're like, oh, I gotta clothe normal people. What do normal people wear? And what do normal people who like actually care about how they look? What do they wear?
Yeah, I mean,
So,
I wear a lot of wrestling t-shirts to work since COVID. I stopped cutting my hair, I stopped shaving, I started wearing t-shirts. Because I'm the only
yeah.
person in the office sometimes. But I still read GQ. I read Vogue. I get those magazines mistakenly sent to me at work because I guess someone put the wrong address. But I thumb through them and I try to keep a mental, Rolodex of what's coming up in fall. If there's bubble vests for guys, and of course the burnt
Hmm.
siennas and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's good to have reference, and it's always, for writers, it's always great when writers provide good reference. Like, here's what I was thinking, for this thing or whatever. And as an artist, I greatly appreciate whenever a writer does that, because, not that I don't want to put the work in to figure this thing out, but if I can get in your mind space so we can start gelling a lot faster, then that's all bonus stuff.
Yeah, I should send you one of my scripts just so you could see the amount of hyperlinks I embed for every single thing. I recently had a conversation with someone, and I would love to get your take on this as an artist. But my friend Danny Earls, I sent him a script that I wrote recently, and he said he loved the script, but as an artist, I had so many specific references and shots that he did not feel inspired as an illustrator. So, how do you feel about that from your side?
I think it's very much it's a case by case gray area type of thing.
Hmm.
I've worked with scripts that were exactly that, like everything down to a T was like not exactly Alan Moore level, but though I don't think Alan Moore called out like camera placement and stuff, but stuff that was just very like they knew what they wanted. But I think I've been fortunate enough to work with writers who are like, if you want to do something different, go ahead. And
Hmm.
there's always layouts and stuff being passed back and forth. But yeah, there is the more direction given sometimes can kind of like throw you off your game a little. Not that it's I could you could call it uninspiring, but it's more like just like, okay, I have to get this out of my head so I can kind of approach it how I would approach it normally and see what's going to work best visually because that's my job. So, the more input that the writer gives in terms of what the visuals are going to what they intend the visuals to look like,
Hmm.
that can it can be like a little bit of a hurdle, but I think that's where communication comes in. And I think that's a crucial part of collaboration between artist and writer is making sure there's that communication where it's like, hey, I'm really specific in all this, but if you want to just go at it different, go ahead. And maybe it might be a thing where it's like, if if you're going to work with art, ask them kind of like how do they like the scripts? How do they,
Hmm.
what kind of direction do they have? Because I've worked with, one page descriptions, one sentence, per panel descriptions of what's happening, and then they fill in the dialogue, not necessarily the Marvel style, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And then I've had stuff that's been very detailed, talking about, oh, and there's, it doesn't play into the story, but, there's this kind of stuff in the background, kind of talking about who the character is and stuff like that. And so yeah, it's, I don't know if I'm helping you with
No,
this.
absolutely.
But I can understand where he's coming from, but it's also like, well, then that's where it's like, okay, well, let me not necessarily push back a bit, but let me say, hey, yeah, this is a lot to like try to like, and for myself, I will always try to do it the way the writer's asking to do it first, because I don't instantly think like I know better. So I'm like, all right, well, let me see how they want it, and let me see if that works. And it's I don't have a percentage to spout off like how much that's correct, how much that's not, but I think it does. I would say every time I've had a project like that, I have made changes, but it doesn't necessarily mean I've completely ignored everything the writer was saying. It may be something where it's like, this seems like a lot, but it seems like a lot because it's one panel. So maybe this has to be a thing that's broken up to 2 panels. And then you can just kind of like work at it that way. So
I prefer when that happens. I'm not going to be a dictator about this and say, no, it has to be like this. If someone comes at me with another take and says, hey, what if we do this? And I say, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And again, it really depends on the relationship you have, because you could just be in a situation where it's like, I've had this script sitting here for a while. It's the script. And an artist, like, you get paired with an artist to do something, and it's like, okay, here's the script. So, they can start working on it. And it's like, well, I don't like working this way. So it's like, okay, well, you don't have a frame, you didn't have like an initial conversation when you're developing the story and all that.
No, you have to sit down and talk. I mean, it's like an arranged marriage, right? You can't just meet the bride the day that you're marrying them, because how do you know it's going to work out?
Yeah, but sometimes that's what happens with like anthologies, if you don't have a say in who your artist is and stuff like that. The writer I've worked with most recently, Philip Butehorn, you know him, at the Illuminati. Yeah. On Twitter, his scripts are, they got plenty of detail on them, but they're not, so bogged down with like, this is the way this has to be. And anytime I've made a change or an adjustment or something, he's been more than happy to roll with it and do his thing. And that's been great. Like I said, I've been very lucky with working with writers who are like, understand where I'm coming from and are like, yeah, just go ahead, let's roll with it. I think maybe like 1 or 2 occasions I've ever had like, well, I really wanted it this way. So then, then they make their case. And as much as art is a creative output and a creative field and all that, it's also a commercial field. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you're gonna have to do a thing that's like, okay, well, that's not how I would do it, but this is the writer, this is the collaboration here, and he's really making the case for this. Am I really that strongly opposed to doing it this way? So, I kind of like, I use the term inspired, but I kind of hate the term inspired, because it's just like you sit down and do the work. Because there's been plenty of times where I'm not inspired to go draw, but I'm like, I have to get this page done. So I sit my ass down and I start working. And next thing I know, I'm rolling on the page. And that's, that's for every creative outlet, I'm sure. But it's nice to have the inspiration where it's like, oh yes, I'm mentally pumped for this, and this is, it's got all my little whatever brain space that creative stuff comes from. It's all flared up and I'm ready to go, and that's great. But sometimes you gotta grind it. But I've done a lot of, I think some of my best stuff is done when I've just sat down and grinded stuff out. So
it's not overthought, right? It's just like, let's sit down and get to this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I've likened it to when I go running. Like there's days where it's like, man, I really do not want to do this run today, and then I have like one of my best runs ever. It's like, okay, well, I just went and did it, and it ended up being a much better experience than I could have possibly expected. And again, it's not 100% foolproof plan, but it's part of the deal, right? Like you can sit down, you're like, okay, I want to work on this story, I'm all jazz, and you can even be inspired, but then like whatever you do, you're like, this isn't it, which is probably like I think is like a problem with the feeling of inspiration, where you have the gusto to do it, and then you do it, and you're like, oh, that's like maybe 50% of what I thought I was doing, or where my brain wanted it to be. So it's rough. It's rough, but it's challenging, and it's fun. It's a little bit of and like intoxicating almost. Like it's creating stuff is great, but it's not always fun.
No, well, a big part with this story that's in Dan that gave that good feedback on, there's not a lot of dialogue. So,
Okay.
it's specifically telling a story through body language or cropped shots for reveals that would come later on
Mm-hmm.
down. Um, Normally I try to keep it loose. If I hate when the page breaks. You know, I
Yeah.
try to keep one script on one page, and
Yeah.
I hate when the page breaks. I'm just like, damn it.
I
No,
greatly
no,
appreciate that as an
yeah.
artist when it's one page per like if even if it's like, all right, well, just the amount of dialogue I have on here is pushing this out, like, well, then just give me the idea of what they're saying, because I don't want to see this page break to the next one. And I think, and I've laid out a 4-panel page, and next thing I know, I flipped a page, and I'm like, oh shit, there's like 2 more panels on this page.
Oh,
Yeah.
geez. Well,
No, but I get what you're saying though. If it's like a mostly silent story, I would appreciate a more descriptive script, because I want to make sure I'm properly conveying what your thoughts on it, what your ideas were.
yeah.
So if it is down to like body language and stuff like that, I would have to examine it in that way. But again, it's all, sitting down and working it out, cuz for me layouts and thumbnails are like pulling teeth, cuz it's like where you make all the hard decisions, and even if it's like 4 scribbles to signify a person, it's like so much hesitation and thought and back and forth went into like where that person is placed and the angle that person is being seen at. It's the most draining part, I think. The actual penciling and inking of the work, that's where the most of the fun comes in. Where that's where you can really sit down and grind things out and kind of like trust in your skills and sit down and just get automatic with it. And I'm sure it's like that with writing too. When you're breaking the story or trying to get the idea and the concept together, it's like, oh man, there's like so many things. But then once you're rolling and you have that core stuff down, it's all like, oh, you get to fly a little bit more. It feels a little more freeing, I think. Or I could be
Absolutely.
wrong.
For me, a lot of writing doesn't look like writing, and this is a joke my wife and I have. But I'll be in the back room playing Red Dead, watching wrestling, just on my phone, messing around. But my mind is trying to, work out the details, so that way, when I do sit down to start scripting, I have the direction I want to go in. Or if something's not working out, I need some menial task to help distract my mind just enough, so that way, subconsciously I can try to come up with what I need.
Oh, totally. And that, I totally, agree with that. Even with art, when I'm
Hmm.
thinking of layouts and stuff like that, I'm not glued to the piece of paper, you know, and also, being, a father of 2, like I can't, I can't spend 8 hours on layouts consistently. So, it could be I'm out on the walk with my kids or something, or I'm at the store or something, and I'm still thinking about, okay, so what if I use this angle, here
Hmm.
and all that, I'll put on, some music. I try to find, music and comics, merging those 2 things is a big thing for me. So, I try to like, listen to something that's kind of giving me the feel of what I'm feeling from the story, and kind
Yeah.
of letting that guide me to like, the pacing and things like that. So even if it's like during a run or during a menial task, like you said, washing the dishes, or you know, not so much playing video games anymore, but yeah, just doing something where you can kind of like, you know, have your brain running in dual mode for a while, you know. And I think that's a really great tool for creative people to utilize, is having your brain run in those two modes, because love them or hate them, one of the, you know, smartest things I ever heard was when Rob Zombie was talking about how he makes music. And like he said, he'll put everything he has down, whatever, make a demo, and then he'll throw it in the car, and then he'll drive around and listen to it, because he's focused on driving and not like running over people and stuff like that.
Yeah.
He's not 100% listening and dissecting everything he's doing, and from there, that's where he can hear different elements that he wants to add and things like that. So it's very much the same concept, I think. So like you said, yeah, so much of writing is is not sitting down at the keyboard and typing. It's the thinking, which is hard to explain to people who don't do it, right? It's like, what are you doing? I'm writing. It's like, it looks like you're just like staring out the window, or it looks like you're just playing a video game, or, you know. So it's like, yeah, but I'm doing two things, I swear.
It is fun trying to explain that to people. When you talk about listening to music, I don't know if maybe I'm just a weirdo, but I like to listen to the same song on repeat. I'll just put on something that I'm feeling, and I'll just have that on. Sometimes it's music scores, sometimes it's lyrical songs. Like the other day, I was listening to the Fargo FX series soundtrack, and their overture that they have, I guess the main theme, is a really good orchestra piece. So I just had that on loop, and the next thing I know, it says I have 120 plays because I just never turned it off.
No, I can definitely fall into that, you know, where it's like, I'm really about this song right now. It's lighting something in my brain where it's like, okay, this is carrying me. So let me, you know, let's repeat. And then, you know, it'll get to the point to where it's like, I never want to hear that song again until like
Exactly.
until it's like 6 months later, and you're like, all right, yeah, that song was awesome. Like, but yeah, a lot of that happens. Like these days, a lot of my layouts and stuff, like I've worked that out while I'm running. And a lot of that is, you know, I have my set list of running songs that occasionally get something added to it. So when I'm, you know, really working on something, it's nice to have a soundtrack, but also I'm so familiar with the songs. It's kind of like the Rob Zombie thing, is where it's like, I'm so familiar with my running route, the songs I'm listening to, that my mind can have the most focus on the story I'm trying to, you know, visualize in my brain. So these other elements, you know, are keeping me just distracted enough to where I'm not overthinking things. So that way, when I do sit down, I can, you know, I'm not staring at a blank page, overthinking what I'm trying to do. Like, I already have a game plan. So, because
I have a playlist. Sorry, what were you saying?
No. Go ahead.
I have a playlist like that, and it starts off with The Chain, and then it goes Stairway to Heaven, then it goes into Money. And those are my top 3 played songs, because whenever I feel like writing, I will put on that playlist, and sometimes I don't make it past the third song before I know what I want to do.
No, that's, you know, it's cool to have that as that your why I cannot think of the term, the diving board or whatever your launch pad for going off. So yeah, you know, my playlist, I tend to just like, oh, here's like 10 songs that have the right feel for me when I'm you know, running or whatever, and then I just hit shuffle. So that way I'm not. It adds that extra bit of mystery of like, all right, I know this song front to back, but when's it coming up?
Yeah.
You know, and then when a new song is introduced and all that, obviously that's a different thing. But it's and you know, we're talking about this kind of works for us, but that doesn't necessarily work for everybody else. Like, there's people who like, no, I need to like sit down and stare at that white page in complete silence, or I need to sit down in a crowded cafe or in a busy area and just have this cacophony around me. So, before I do my thing or whatever. So I think that's a not discussed enough thing with creating stuff, is like everyone's going to have a different preference for what makes, where are you comfortable creating? Where are you comfortable doing your thing? And while you won't be able to like always have that spot, place, frame of mind, method, whatever, I think it's important to find what your most comfortable thing is, so that way you can always, do your best to try to aspire to get to that place.
Mm-hmm.
I think some people don't think about that enough, because, I would think that my space would be somewhere else, but it's actually this other thing. So, let me try to do that. And if you're more comfortable creating, you create more. That's just a fact. So,
I'm going to say I'm glad you brought up writing in cafes. That is something I despise. I have a relationship that is akin to hate the sin, love the sinner.
mm-hmm.
I hate the act of it, but I like people who do that, if that makes sense. I feel that it takes up a spot at a dining establishment that I could have sat down and enjoyed a scone or something while my wife drinks coffee. But instead, it's a guy who set up their full office with a desktop computer and two like dual screen monitors.
Oh, Jesus.
And then they get mad at you if you interrupt their conference call by ordering your food. That's quite extreme, but
yeah, those people should probably be shot into the sun. But the guy sitting at his laptop, this, not to call it a stereotype, but the stereotype of the guy banging on a screenplay and laptop in the cafe. Whatever works for you. Like, I think it should be embraced. Like I remember, I don't know how true this is, but I remember Greg Capullo, the mega star artist of Batman and Spawn. Like, he just mentions that he draws in silence.
Wow, really?
Which I'm like, what? Like, as much metal this guy loves, like, really? And I don't know how true that is or how consistent that is, but I just remember him answering a few times when that question was brought up. Like, yeah, I just sit down and I start drawing and no music's playing. It's all in my head.
Well,
it's like,
I guess there's enough clanging and banging with the weights that needs some quiet.
I think he did reference like that's where he's pumping the tunes, which like, okay, that makes sense. But yeah, it is about especially these days where it's like there's access to so many people who are creating. You can't really afford not to try to at least find your most comfortable space doing it. And even going back to the the idea and the stress of like having to show you're working all the time and doing all these things, it's like, how do you do that if you're not, if you're gonna embrace that idea of like, okay, well, I have to at least a few times a week show a drawing or show something I'm doing. It's a lot easier if you just know yourself and where you can do your best stuff. And that may take some time for some people, but it's an endeavor I think that's well worth it. So, hello?
I'm here.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I was just soaking in what you said here. I mean, it's one of those things that, you have to play the game, but at the same time, you hate the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, again, it's really, different. And also different communities are the same. Like, I can only speak to the community around me and the people I know around me, where it's like, well, even if I'm not drawing, I am pretty much on social media every day. Mm-hmm. Which I probably shouldn't be. I don't think anyone should be, but that's just the fact. Like, so even if I'm not posting art or able to post things, I'm still at least trying to engage those who are posting art and things like that. So there is that, like you said, way back in the beginning, like the people are going to forget you, and out of sight, out of mind, which you know, and these days feels like a very real thing, but, you know, I don't think it is. Like, you know, especially if you've taken the time and you've, you know, found your peers and you've nurtured those relationships and you have genuine, you know, interactions with people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're gone for a week or 2 weeks or whatever, you know, people will probably know, you know, will most likely notice you're gone, or they'll probably think, oh man, he's probably taking a break off Twitter. Good idea. Like, you know.
I think a big part of it is also the algorithm for social media, where the
Oh,
more
definitely.
people interact with you, the more they will see your stuff. So even if you take a
Yeah.
break, you risk dropping off of someone's algorithm.
Yeah, that's a definite thing. And, you know, because there's people, you know, that I, you know, people that I'm friends with and people that I'm constantly interacting with, but, you know, I'll see them retweet something they tweeted earlier in the day. I'm like, wait, I was on Twitter around this time. I did not see this. Like, when was this? So, you know, even if I have like the settings on Twitter, like to show me all the latest tweets first, I still think there's some fuckery behind there where they're not showing you everything because things are still like being gamed somehow. And Instagram, I don't even know Instagram. Like, I have an Instagram. I don't try to play that game. Like, I tried for a while, like doing the hashtags and all that stuff, and it's like, it's the I don't know what the algorithm is there. So I'm just like, whatever. I'll put stuff up on there, but I'm not trying to like build any like huge following there because you can't. I don't know how to game that system
No,
or
Instagram
play
and
within
Facebook
that
are weird
system.
for me. Instagram, not so much, but like you said, you can't really figure out that algorithm. Facebook, I will see the same articles from the same people on the first, like when I open up the app for like a week. And I pull down the refresh, but it's still
Hmm.
whoever talking about the same thing. I'm just like, is this a new post? No, it's the same one. So I don't know what settings I have to do to see latest first on there.
I don't think Facebook lets you do that, which I think
Yeah,
is a huge weird thing. And yeah, you know, for Facebook, I do put art stuff on Facebook, but again, it's like it's treated, you know, with less attention even than my Instagram. Like, oh yeah, I guess I should put this on the Facebook thing too. Like my Facebook is mainly just keeping in touch with people I know and stuff like that, and just yeah, it's the Facebook page for my art is just like the like the cast out of my social media family. Like, yeah, it's I'll throw him a bone every now and then, but mainly it's just like, yeah, because you know it's you know my quote unquote biggest following is on Twitter, which, you know, even then, you know, you could have 15,000 followers. Not that I'm anywhere possibly near that, but 15,000 followers. But then you look at people's tweets and stuff, and there's like, you know, less than 100 engagements or likes or retweets or whatever. So it's like, what is that? Like, I don't understand. You know, like it's all algorithms and like playing a game, and it's like it's maddening because sometimes you get sucked into wanting to lean into that, and then you're like, okay, how do I do this? And you try to do the things, and it's like, well, I'm not seeing any improvement. Then you get, you know, this like I don't know what the hell to do. Should I just delete this whole damn thing and just go away? You
I
know,
don't know. You know, I
I,
try to my Facebook is pretty much just cross posts with Instagram. I will, do stuff on Instagram and I'll just say share to Facebook, and that's pretty
mhm.
much how I leave that. I'll say happy birthday to people. I get alerts for like for people's birthdays, of
Yeah,
course. I don't get alerts for much else.
yeah, yeah. But my Instagram is literally just like art or guitar stuff.
Hmm.
Like that's all. That's probably why I don't do like personal stuff on Instagram. You know, and that's probably one of the things that, you know, juices the algorithm. Like if it's like, oh, he's posting, you know, selfies of himself, or he's posting like you know, scenic looking locations. And I don't know if you've ever seen this. Like sometimes when there's a glitch in Instagram, there'll be like a descriptor of the photo, and you get like peeks into the algorithm in it,
I'm
where it's
not
like
too sure.
it's like it's I've seen stuff where it's like it literally describes the photo, and it's this weird seeing it broken down that way, and it's because it's being run, it's being run through some image recognition thing while it's posted, and for recommendations and stuff like that. But it's just weird seeing that like laid out instead of the image. It's
No,
yeah.
I've missed
Yeah.
that. I mean, I've gotten weird targeted ads for things I just casually talk to my wife about, or things I'm thinking about, and I'll get an
Yeah.
ad for it. But I've never seen just like in lieu of a photo the description of it. Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, one was my buddies. He was like, he posted a picture of him feeding his son. It was like, oh, a man, and it was like in parentheses, like approximately in his 30s, spoon feeding a young child, and then like possibly male or something like that. Like it was just like, what? It's
And
going.
that's some. I don't know if you ever played Assassin's Creed, but that's some Abstergo Industries stuff right there.
That's no, I have not. Like the most recent video game I've played is like Skyrim.
Oh wow, okay, yeah, that was
Oh no,
fun.
wait, I played the first new Doom on my
Oh
PC after,
yeah.
but that's because I got it for like $6 after like Eternal came out, and I played it for like, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna take one day a week, and I'm gonna relax. I'm gonna play my video game for an hour or two, and I'm at that age where I call it my video game, um, and just do that. And then I did that for like 2 weeks, and then I just stopped. So, but
Yeah.
I went and I got this stupid widescreen monitor, so I should probably pick that up again because it looks pretty damn cool on there. So, but yeah, it's social media, and it's a mind fuck sometimes. And yeah, and seeing like the skeleton behind it is just like, that was really jarring, I think. And I just like, okay, well, that's what we're reduced down to, right? Just like, if you could say like, well, because I think, does it Twitter does that, where you can add like a visual descriptor
Yes. I've
for
never used it, but
people.
you can.
So it's like, okay, well, that's an accessibility thing, that's cool. But it's also like, well, where did that come from? I'm sure like their first thought wasn't like, oh, let's figure out how to how vision impaired people can better use our platform, and more like, oh, how do we break down these images so we can benefit ourselves most?
I would
How
just
can we?
wonder how they find me.
Yeah. So yeah, it's crazy, and especially with the comics industry, the Twitter and social media, it can drive you nuts, and has driven me nuts, and it's just, it's rough. It's rough, but so that's why it's important to try to keep positive and just put the positive things out there. And touching back to what we said about the the secret news, great secret news, like just kind of like maybe embracing more of that than the negative stuff, or the movements out there with full of not great people spouting
Yeah.
not great things.
Oh, geez.
um
Yeah, I try not to talk about negative stuff.
yeah,
You know,
it's
I try to talk about things I like. Except football Sundays, I will explain my disappointment with the Philadelphia Eagles. And if I'm
but
watching wrestling, I'm just like, yeah, I don't like this.
my favorite thing about Twitter on Sunday is seeing everybody
Oh,
who's in the football just bitching about football.
yep.
It's hilarious. I don't know enough to like hold a steady conversation in terms of like teams and stuff like that, but I can follow enough based on what people say. But it's just like, oh, like this is like hilarious to me. Like just 'cause and then the rivalry, the friendly rivalries that pop up between creators for their sports teams and stuff like that. And it's just, yeah, I think who's a big one on Sundays. I think Gavin Goodry is big about posting. Of course, Joe Mulvey. He's he's always swearing about some sports team. But yeah, it's just entertaining to me because it's like, I don't get it, but I get it. It seems like I never got into the watching the sports, though I understand it. Just like the wrestling. Like I totally understand like the fun of wrestling and stuff like that. I just never really really got into it. Like the peak that where I would have gotten into it was like, you know, the early, just before the Attitude Era of WWE.
Okay.
Like that's where I remember watching it the most. Where you had you still had like the Ultimate Warrior and Undertaker and Tatanka and stuff like that, and what was it? What was his name? Yokozuna. And you know that kind of stuff, and like kind of like the, you know, the beginning of WCW a little bit. But you know, I was never consistent watching it or whatever, and anything like that. But no, I get it. What people dig it because it's a fun, you know, it's a fun thing, and the storyline. You know, if you're into comics and you're like, I don't get people into wrestling. It's like, do you get comics? Like,
yeah,
like
oh,
this is
man,
the closest thing we have, really. You know, aside from like the TV shows, it's like this is like real people doing crazy ass shit.
I don't get the creators who say, "Oh, wrestling's fake." I'm like, yeah, so's Dragon Ball Z and all the other stuff you like.
Yeah. You know, Grant
real.
Gustin isn't actually running that fast, right? Like, you know, Stephen Amell doesn't know how to shoot a bow and arrow that well, right? You know, you get that, right? So, no, and it, you know, the wrestling, it's fake. It's scripted, sure, but I mean, you see these guys in their later years, they're battered and broken, and it's like,
of course,
that shit was real. Those hits were real, man. Like, it's rough, you know. And I think that's. I think that kind of has to do something to do with like the, you know, not that to speak on something I'm not totally familiar with, but there seems to be kind of like a renaissance with wrestling now, televised wrestling and stuff like that, with like AEW and stuff like that, because I hear enough about it from people who are really into it, and I think people knowing more of the behind the scenes stuff and people, you know, understanding like the physical aspects and tolls a lot more with what people are doing. It's not such a, there's not such a like an iron curtain behind, you know, that's the secret stuff, you know, someone gets hurt or whatever. So I think that's actually been a benefit to that industry, because people, you know, it becomes more relatable. It becomes more, you know, not that the average person can go up there and do that stuff, but it's like, oh, these are people too. And, you know, it becomes a bit more, because it's fun to have the larger than life actors of that and all that. But, you know, the prime of that, I think, is kind of going away, especially with like the Undertaker retiring and stuff like that. Like, where it's like these complete shrouds of mystery and stuff like that. And, you know, you're seeing like the Undertaker do those cameo videos where it's like, or just have, you know, I watched the episode of the Hot Wings show with the Undertaker in it. And he's just speaking like a normal dude. And it's just like, you know, but for like, you know, 40 years of his life, he couldn't do that. You know, he had to be the Undertaker whenever he was doing interviews. So, you know, it's, I think that's been a boon to the industry. I don't know, as a fan, do you think that's true? Like that's been kind of a benefit to wrestling, having that kind of more insider type look into things?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a more mature adult now, so I appreciate the human relatable aspects of, you know, okay, this is someone who's good at their craft and their performance, you know, and this is how they do it. This is how they got into it. This is how they got started. You know, I know that, let's say, one character who's playing an evil foreigner doesn't hate America. He loves working in America. You know, he's probably born in America the whole time. They just said, hey, put on an accent and pretend you're, you know, from wherever.
Yeah.
You know, I can see it's like comics now, right? You can read the Spider-Man and have no idea who writes it, who draws it. You have no care who writes it, who draws it. You just want to read Spider-Man. Or you can just dig in further and say, oh, okay, you know, I know who Dan Slott is, and, you know, a lot of the other artists. You could dig into their social media and follow them and see what else they're doing, what they're up to. And if they, you know, post, you know, works in progress and, you know, commissions and such. I mean, there's parallels with that now because of social media, where it's not like when I was a kid, I had no idea who Todd DeZago was.
No.
You know, he's a comic book writer. I guess he
Mhm.
wrote a bunch of Spider-Man issues and a bunch of X-Men issues, but
Yeah,
I wouldn't
yeah,
have known because I'm reading it,
yeah,
Spider-Man and X-Men.
yeah. It's wild to me. Like, as much as I've like talked about, about some of the negative effects of social media, it is kind of awesome where it's like, oh, Jerry Ordway just liked a tweet of a drawing I did. Like,
Yeah,
what? Like, and instantly I'm drawn back to like when I'm like 13 years old, seeing Jerry Ordway comics displayed in Wizard magazine and stuff, and I'm like,
yeah,
what is going on here? So
yeah.
yeah, it's yeah, I can totally see what you mean with the parallels of everything in that.
I felt that way recently. I had someone was talking about comics that you started with, and I never read DC until Kevin Smith did a Green Arrow run.
Hmm.
And I started more or less. I've been reading DC since I want to say 2004. But I put that out there. It's like I never really read DC until Kevin Smith started with his Green Arrow run, and Phil Hester liked the tweet. I was like, oh wow, Phil was the artist on that run.
Yeah, Phil's great. Phil's great.
That's all those
He's
things like, oh shit, this guy's seeing what I'm putting out. Maybe I should watch what I say.
uh no, Phil has he's kind of like the really cool uncle of
Hmm.
comics. He's definitely, ultra talented and, still, one of the best artists out there. Um but he's also been around enough to where it's like, so many of us can hold him in some point of reverence where it's like, oh shit, like, you know, Phil liked my tweet. Cool. Like, or, whenever there's like a drawing or something I post and an artist I really respect, will like, even if it's just like a work in progress or a sketch or whatever, it's like,
Hmm.
oh, they saw that and they're like, oh, that's fine. Like, you build it up in your head, of course, but, because how many times do we like things in a day? So but it's, really cool just to see that the little modicum of interaction with people that were, like you said, you didn't know who Todd DeZago was. Like, he was a name. He's the guy who wrote Spider-Man. And then thanks to social media, not that this is Todd, but like, that this creator you like, you also know a lot more about them for better or worse. But it's but hopefully for the better. You
Hopefully.
or it's like, oh, this guy loves, he has this kind of dog and I have this kind of dog and that's cool, and he's really passionate about this particular movie or show or band, and so am I, and that's the great stuff, where you kind of like feel that greater sense of connection with everything. It's just, the pendulum swings both ways though, I guess. So, but no, I think, you know bringing it, the wrestling aspect into it, or the idea of it being a boon to wrestling, I think it did really help comics, but now it's kind of getting to a point where it can go off the rails now, especially with the negative stuff. So
Yeah, it's a slippery slope. I mean,
it is, yeah,
you,
yeah.
you, I don't know if you want to separate the art from the artist type of thing. That's a whole different ball
That's
of
a whole
wax
nother
to get
discussion.
into.
That's a whole nother discussion. It's a whole nother case by case basis because, there's a certain movement in comics that is not very inclusive, and or despite their insistences, and I'm not trying to invoke their name because fuck them.
Of
Uh,
course.
but it's always a little disheartening to see someone you respect or know kind of like flirt with them on the periphery of stuff. Where it's like, oh, they're, I'm not gonna say names, but there was an artist that was greatly respected and is massive talent, but I'm seeing that he's like gonna be on like streams with some of these people, and it's like, does he not know? Because these other people are kind of on the periphery themselves of it, and it's like, that's weird. Like, it's impossible to paint everything with the same brush, but yeah, separating art from the artist, it's when it gets to a certain point, I just, like I said, I can't enjoy this anymore. That's
Of
fine.
course.
I'm done. You know. it could be a gray area sometimes, but I think when the lines are more defined, I have to, for myself, like, I have to make that cut. Like,
Of
I
course.
can't. So, but that's only
There's
my
certain
personal
things
experience.
like, oh, they didn't pay their taxes. It's like, well, okay.
Well, like
Well,
everyone was busting on Wesley Snipes for the tax thing and him going to jail, and it wasn't his fault. He trusted the wrong people.
yeah.
But he had to bear the responsibility of that. And, I felt bad when I realized that's what it was, because not that I went around making Wesley Snipes in jail jokes, but like I had an assumption like, oh, he was trying to do something shady. And it's like, oh no, actually it was the people he trusted did something shady. So it's like, well, then you feel bad for the guy. And it's like, because, that happened at a time where he probably would have, had a career upswing or something like that. So yeah, things get tricky. Real tricky. All right, Mario. Well, I've had a blast talking to you. I've kept you on here for quite some time. I'm sure you want to get some more work in or go to sleep. I'm not sure. You're an hour ahead of me. So I always appreciate when people... I always
I'm about
appreciate
to fall
when...
asleep.
Oh, there you go.
I wake up to go to work early, so yeah. But no, this was fun.
I always appreciate when the East Coasters like past an hour. So if there's you'd like to tell the people listening like where they could find you on social media, where they can get your work, and what else, anything in the future they can look out for from you.
Yeah, so my Twitter is the other Mario C, and my website, if anyone wants to go there, check out links to the chart or find any of my previous works and comics. It's theothermarioc.com. I have an Instagram, but it's really just random stuff, and that is another Mario C. But Twitter is probably the best place to get hold of me. And I have KILLCHELLA coming out from Scout. I can say publicly that I have something coming with Mad Cave.
Okay.
I was one of their talent hunt winners from 2020, and they said that all the talent hunt winners will be part of an anthology that's coming up from them. So I know I can say that, but I can't say much else about it.
No, that's awesome. Congratulations on that.
Thank
Well
you.
deserved. Well, Mario, thank you again for coming on. It's been a blast talking to you. We'll have to, once KILLCHELLA drops and it's hopefully an amazing, huge success, and you have like the first collection ready to come out, you come back on and we'll talk about, how your life has changed after, you drop KILLCHELLA on the world.
Hopefully. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks.
Right.
Thank you for listening to the Comics Coffee Metal podcast. If you would like to support the show, please consider going to ko-fi.com/comicscoffeemetal and dropping a tip for the show. That's ko-fi.com/comicscoffeemetal. All funds raised by the show go directly back into it to help spread the word. If you have show or guest suggestions, comments, or questions, please send them to comicscoffeemetal@gmail.com.